here we are. We're going to do a quick little video for folks out there because I had some great questions that came up this week that I think you can help me with. So I'm Marie Jacobs, and I'm with Sotheby's Realty. And with me, I have one of the smartest financial guys on the planet, as far as I'm concerned. That's Brady Mullen. And Brady has done a number of classes that I have learned so much from you, Brady. And I am so excited to be able to do these little short videos so that we can kind of tell the world what's going on and how to make the most out of investing in real estate. And I think that's just such a gift you have.
Well, thank you.
So today I have a question, and you have never heard this question out of me. So I'm gonna, well, maybe you have, but I'm gonna ask you the question, and I want to get your spontaneous answer, and I don't know, have a conversation about this.
Okay.
Because it's been 3 years since COVID. Like March, we just went into quarantine. So it's 3 years since we went into quarantine, and now the real estate market's really, really changing, and people aren't certain what to do now because interest rates are up in the 6.5%, and sometimes 7%. And so people are reluctant to move up, like sell their house they bought a bunch of time ago and move up because they have interest rates that are 3 and 3.5%, and don't think that they can do this affording this 6.5%. And you and I have talked about this topic a little before, but my accountant, I'm getting my taxes done right now. My accountant said, no, it's better for you to just sell the one you've got because I'm sitting on all this equity in a house that I have 3.5% interest rate on. But that equity, you made a comment last week in a class I took of yours about dead equity and not being able to use all that equity I've got in another property to invest in something else. And my accountant said, sell that one and go buy another one the same price, and that's going to use that equity a little bit better, or go buy two in a little different market that might be a little lower. So I kind of want you to get your thoughts on that from a real estate investing.
Yeah, so you're talking
about
the one you own as an investment or one of your investments, and you're talking about, and the accountant recommends selling that and buying rather than just refinancing. Is that what am I clear on that question?
Right, because if I refinance, I'd refinance at a higher rate anyway. That is one way to go. So we didn't say not to do that, but it also helps on depreciation and the things you can write off having a higher mortgage. And of course, that's an investment property for me. So we're getting rent. So we got to make sure the numbers work to cover the rent.
Yeah, let me. There's a couple things that you mentioned in there that are common. I don't want to say they're common misunderstandings. They're just things that people will calculate roughly or forget to calculate, and they just belong in the conversation. That wasn't very clear the way I said that, but what I mean is, if you have a property, let's say you've got a property that's an investment property with, let's say, 3.5% mortgage. You can, if you have equity in that, there's a couple ways to access that. You could just go get a HELOC, and then you're keeping that first mortgage in place at the 3.5%, which is ideal. And then you get a HELOC, and that allows you to use that money to go and leverage another property. Or you could sell it and take that, but I really don't see the point of selling it unless you're going to do something like a 1031 exchange and you just want more doors, or you just want to get something, you just want to move. There's like tactical reasons to do that sort of thing. But
well, let me interrupt there. I think that was the idea. Utilize a 1031 exchange and get more doors, because what I'm trying to do is prepare for retirement. And so the more doors that I have that I can rent, the better off I'm going to be. So if I can buy 2 properties with the proceeds and get both of those properties renting, then now, I'm building equity right away, and I'm getting rent to cover my mortgage.
I guess I don't see the need to sell the property in order to do that if you can just access the equity. So a couple things. You could do either way, of course, but it's not just the tax consequences that you want to keep in mind. You also want to keep in just overall expenses. And I don't want to pay interest, any higher interest than I have to anyways. And this was a part of our conversation the other day about debt equity, and we'll talk about that a little bit in a second. But there's another common misunderstanding that people have about tax deductions. I hear people say all the time, like, oh, you want to have this expense because it's a tax deduction, and that isn't correct, right? A tax deduction just means you get to subtract it from your revenue in your business before, so you don't have to pay taxes on that money. So for every dollar that I deduct as an expense in my business, that saves me maybe 30 or 40 cents on my taxes, but I still have to spend the dollar to save the money. So I would never get a mortgage for the specific purposes of getting a tax deduction. That doesn't make sense to me, because you'll never get as much benefit in taxes as the dollars you're spending to get the benefit. Essentially, it just doesn't work that way. That's the tail wagging the dog. Now, the fact that it is tax deductible, that is helpful, but it doesn't erase that expense. It's not like it's free. It's not like it's free money. Like if you spend it, you're not really spending it. Sometimes people approach it with that attitude, and that's just incorrect. Deducting it is helpful, but it doesn't offset it.
Coupling that with your appreciation in the property, especially if you can sell a property and buy two. I mean, I get what you're saying, and I agree with you. If you can do it with a HELOC instead of selling the property and still buy, another property so that you have two, and then you're gaining appreciation on each of those properties, plus you're getting the tax write-off, plus you're getting whatever depreciation you get and things like that. But somebody else is paying your mortgage.
Yeah, let's talk about that. Let's talk about that debt equity. I completely agree with that. You got to get that equity back to work. And before I'll pull up a slide that kind of explains that, or a visual. But your instincts on that are correct. So the simplest thing, a lot of times we make decisions based on the information that's simple to understand for all of us. That's just the way we all work. And depending on how well you know a particular industry, sometimes you know what sort of pitfalls to avoid. And we know this one because we're in the real estate industry, but it's a common misconception. And I'm not saying this that I know this and other people don't. It's just an industry that we're in, so we see this a lot. But when I go into the doctor, he'll have instincts that he wants me to avoid because they're misleading, and I don't know that as well. So my whole point in all this is saying, like, this is just a common misunderstanding for people to, they have a 3.5% mortgage on their investment property, or maybe even their current property, and they don't make smart real estate decisions because they don't want to let go of that 3.5% mortgage, or 3.0 or 2.7 or whatever. And all things equal, I do want a lower interest rate. That's undeniable. But all else isn't equal. There are equity components that, think about it. If I have a property that's worth, say, $600,000, and I owe $200,000 on it, and that $200,000 mortgage is at 3% or something, I have a bunch of equity in that house, and this is what we call debt equity in the industry. I have a bunch of debt equity in that house that isn't doing anything for me, because if that house appreciates by $50,000, it doesn't matter how much leverage I have in that property. I get all $50,000 of the appreciation, which is great. Mm-hmm. And where this comes into play is if I could use some of my equity in that house to go and have two houses, then when one appreciates by $50,000, the other one also appreciates by $50,000 if they're of similar value. So now I get $100,000 of the appreciation without changing my equity. So total.
As usual, you have given me all kinds of new information, and I'm so grateful for you, and I'm so grateful for our listeners who get to reap the benefits of your wonderful financial knowledge.
Well, I appreciate that.
I'll be excited to do this again next week.